Okay, you're being recorded.
Ready to go, my
Okay,
friend?
recording's on. I'm still admitting people, but go for it.
Okay. First of all, welcome everybody. I apologize for all the logistical problems, but that's just part of the problem getting old. I think my computer's getting as old as I am. It decided to go haywire on me. So be that as may, I'm looking really forward to today, and I'm going to present the first part of this, and then we're going to have Ryan Valdez actually walk through a case study using the MEDDIC process. And he won. Help me, Ryan. How big was that MRR you won? It was over 20, right?
Yeah, 22.4.
22.4. And so we pretty actively applied this MEDDIC methodology there. So it's a really good tangible example of it. So you may be asking yourself why we bothering with this MEDDIC process is my goal for us is to master the sales process, particularly the sales process around the co-managed or large complex sales. And MEDDIC is actually the kind of gold standard for basically enterprise level players in the IT industry about how they actually organize, pursue, and basically review deals too, to figure out what they need to do differently and how to keep the energy and momentum going in any sales opportunity. So MEDDIC is basically kind of the state of the art. And the way I look at it for us, it's kind of like the equivalent of EOS of selling. So today what we're going to do is cover a lot of the foundation of it and fundamentals of it. And over time, we'll apply it to both new business development, and I believe it has an application to client account management process as well. So it's actually going to affect both of you, everybody actually on the phone and on the call. But it's also something that we're just going to keep applying and refining and applying and refining and just get better at doing it than our competition. I think in particular, when we get involved in big opportunities, we want to really outmaneuver our competition. We want to be better than them at applying this stuff, more proactive in our pursuit, and we'll talk through how MEDDIC allows us to do that. One thing that I noticed in Ryan's situation, and we went through this whole process with Ryan Eichler too, is what it allows us to do is kind of start at the end of the process to say, if we look at the end of the process being a signed contract, no matter where we're at in kind of our selling process and the client's buying process, how do we keep that momentum going? How do we get them to commit to things we know we need in order to be able to help them? And so it's also, it's not only a practice, it's also a planning methodology to keep you on track and keep your opportunities on track. And Ryan will go through that example today. So today really is just foundational training. It's really the start. It's going to be something that we're going to reinforce and include in our STP program in 2024. But it's really just to give you a grounding in it, what it is, why it's valuable, why it's important, and be able to share at least one example of how it made a difference in the success of one of our STP members. But first of all, MEDDIC is not a process, right? So this is a kind of the standard sales process that we use in STP. We went through a couple of refinements of this with both Ryan Valdez, Ryan Eichler, and a couple other people to say, if we looked at our classic stage gates in sales process, what should we really be doing to pursue each and every opportunity, right? And we're going to talk about this first from a new business development standpoint, but if you just change the names a little bit, it equally applies to CAMs, and I'll go into that at the end. But if you think about an opportunity, right? What one of Ryan Eichler's big innovations in his success was he went to work for a company called MAS Solutions, and they had a very diligent qualification call before they would ever pursue any opportunity. And it was very thorough. They had very explicit measures and attributes they were looking for in an opportunity. And they're able to do that, by the way, because they had so many inbound leads because they're really good at marketing. But what I still believe is the first step in our sales process should be a diligent, thorough phone call or qualification call with an opportunity to make sure it's got all the things you need in place. And it's also the first impression to make with them, right? So your first impression wants to be almost as good as your impression you make in a discovery meeting. So having an agenda, having specific questions, capturing the questions, sending to the client, there's a methodology we'll come up with that we recommend everybody follows. But that's really the first step and the first impression you want to make with a prospective client. And then the discovery meeting, obviously, is the second point. And what Ryan and I are going to do, or I'm going to do with some people's help, is we're going to have, for each of these steps, we'll put it in some form of Teams site, and actually have the specific questions and specific milestones you're looking for in each of these sales steps, right? So you have the discovery meeting. Then what we'll find here, and what MEDDIC kind of teaches us, and what Ryan will talk about in his example, is we always think about this next step as like the assessment step, which oftentimes is just kind of a computer exercise. But we also believe, using MEDDIC, there's ways you can engage with the client to interview different stakeholders. Ryan's going to go through his walkthroughs he did there. But I think we can really distinguish ourselves in that assessment step in ways that we may not currently be doing. And we're going to give examples of that to people as we go through it. And then the next step is the business case. And what MEDDIC allows us to do is to be building the business case throughout the whole process. So by interviewing more people, by finding different sources of pain, by identifying different kinds of metrics, what it's going to allow us to do is have a kind of bulletproof business case as we go through the process, and hopefully, again, a much better business case than our competition is going to have. And then what happens oftentimes is, particularly big opportunities, we get to step 4, and all of a sudden things go off the rails. They either ghost us, or they review proposals, or they basically disengage. So again, another thing we want to use in MEDDIC is to build an active and proactive consensus building process, whereby we are continually reinforcing why we're the best choice for these people, and finding ways to keep the momentum going, even when there's complexity or roadblocks in the way. And then close. And what close says is close really means everything's done and they signed the check, right? So all the paper processes in place, all the boxes are checked, all the agreements completely ratified. And that can oftentimes be complex in a big situation as well. So MEDDIC just gives us basically a toolbox that we're going to use in our sales process to see how qualified everything is at each step of the process here. Right, so MEDDIC is the qualifications or the attributes we're looking at each of these steps in the sales process to tell us, are we moving forward? Is this really qualified? What do we have to change to make it more qualified? And what do we have to change in order to make it more likely that we're going to be the one that's selected at the end? So again, it's not a process. What it is a set of attributes we're looking at as we go through this process. And just definitionally, just so we know what it means, it's not actually very complex. Excuse me. So and it actually doesn't go into sequence too. So there's no implication to the sequence. It's just the different attributes we're looking at different points of the sales process, right? So what it says is, optimally, when we're looking, particularly if you think of a big company, kind of like Cisco, something like that, and these guys their salespeople are really good, and they come to their sales manager and they say, here's an opportunity, it's great, it's going to close, right? What that sales manager is going to do is actually take them through where they're at in the process, and which one of these boxes they've ticked off in terms of MEDDIC, and this will make more sense in a second. But MEDDIC basically starts with metrics. What they want us to do is to be able to define a set of metrics that makes a very good business case that what we offer in the future state is better than what they've experienced in the current state. I'll go into that more detail. E stands for economic buyer. And what it says is, ideally, you want to be engaged with the economic buyer, know their pain, know how they're going to make a decision, know how they make decisions in the past, know why this is important to them, know how they're going to interact with other stakeholders to make a decision. But if you don't have, and this is where a lot of people get off track, is if you don't have access to the economic buyer, you're pretty much, if you're not careful, you're selling to the wrong person. Right, and you're selling to the wrong pain, right? So we'll talk about how this applies in a second. D is decision process. first D. So that's just literally, where are they at in the decision process? How are they going to make a decision? What's the next step? How do we think 2 steps in advance, right? How do we influence the decision process? But one of the more important parts of this is decision criteria. One attribute of MEDDIC that we'll go through in a second is it says that we should be identifying the final decision-making criteria they're going to use to select the ultimate MSP as early in the process as possible, and be talking to them and reinforcing those decision criteria, and as much as possible influencing into the attributes that make us a better choice. And oftentimes we talk about the decision criteria kind of superficially and maybe not in detail. And we certainly kind of assume we know what it is and then kind of let that influence the whole rest of the process. What this says is you're continually identifying the decision criteria, getting confirmation from the buyer that that's truly the decision criteria, and then making sure that we're doing as much as possible to say, here's the attributes we have against that decision criteria that are different and better than anybody else you're talking to. And it talks about pain, and we're going to get into pain a lot, but this should not be a new concept here. But what they really make a big point of is you're always talking pain, and you're starting every meeting you're talking about pain, and you're trying to see how pain affects different people differently. And it really puts pain at the heart of all the discussions that you're going to have with people, or all the questioning that you're going to have, right? The other thing that's unique about it, it says that and in many cases in big companies, they say if you don't have a champion that's influencing the decision your way, it's not a good deal. And so what we want to do is consciously find a champion, cultivate that person, kind of get them to advocate for us, and have them have a vested interest in us winning. So we're always looking for a champion. So I usually have somebody do the slides for me, so sorry about that. Even though it doesn't fit the framework, they've added things over the years, which C is for competition. And it's not just another MSP. What they talk about in terms of competition is it's any force that's going to keep them from signing a deal with you. So included in competition is obviously direct competitors, but it's also things like inertia, or deciding not to decide, having something else be a higher priority that shows up and therefore this gets put to the side. It's really just saying, what are all the competing forces that keeps them from signing a deal with you, right, in a broader sense. And then they've added this P here, which is a paper process. Is what they really want to know is you don't want to get surprised at the end that you got to go through some kind of convoluted procurement process. You want to build in the paper process into the decision process so that you're kind of checking off those boxes as it goes, right? So you might say none of that's really all that astounding. It's kind of like EOS. Like if you look at EOS, it doesn't look all that astounding until you actually start to use it and start to apply it to real life situations and see how it changes the way you think about something or changes the way you act about something. So it's very similar in that regard. It's a framework. Again, it's qualities that we're looking for as we go through the sales process, to see, to help us do a better job than our competition, to keep energy in the sales process, to incorporate all the things that could go wrong early in the process so that we're kind of we're anticipating them, we're reacting to them, and we're having a process that helps us. I think, to be honest with it, I think it's easy to get lazy about the sales process, or it's easy to get kind of superficial about it. So again, one of our goals now is to be masters of it, to literally be skillful, more skillful than anybody else or these people are interacting with, and to leave an impression that other MSPs are not leaving in terms of our competency, in terms of our organizational skills, in terms of our consultative nature. It allows us to show ourselves better and be more kind of organized and proactive in the sales process than is possible without it. So here's how so I went and got certified and all this stuff, and kind of started thinking back on my own experience and experience I've had with clients that were really good at like sales. So like in my past, I've worked with like IBM and Cisco and Accenture and some other places. That's their whole life, is basically large complex deals, right? And they get really good at doing certain things, and they tend to methodologize it. So thinking back kind of both in the practical experience and then the kind of structure of MEDDIC, we came up with this kind of 3 basic applications of it. One is value, and what value in terms of metrics, in terms of MEDDIC means is knowing and understanding and what they call implicating the pain across a broad stake of stakeholders, but really understanding the pain in depth, understanding the implication of the pain in depth, understanding how it affects different people, and having an understanding in deep about what's tangible evidence of that pain. You know, if you talk through it and say, okay, this is the problem, you really want to get down to the level is how big a problem, to whom, why, and what's it costing the organization now. That's kind of the depth of pain you want to get to. And therefore, that pain influences what we're going to talk about in terms of metrics. So metrics means something either quantifiable or at least, I should say quantitative, or at least quantifiable, about if they bought from you, how would their life be different, in something that you can actually enumerate or at least estimate some kind of impact, right? So the better job we do with that, we know that we understand their pain, but also we're going to have a better business case than somebody else that's not going through that effort. And then DC, again, what happens here is it moves decision criteria up in the process, and it's going to get reinforced and tested throughout the other stops, right? So what it says is, what we want to know is, based on the pain and based on the metrics, what are the decision criteria that most favor that the client should adopt, right? Or do they have and should they adopt? Which you find in many cases they don't have decision criteria, so it can influence it. And then 2 is, how do we start to shade that decision criteria towards attributes that make us the best choice, that differentiate us, that actually plays into our strengths and not our competition strengths. But basically, how do we keep getting the client to tell us, here's how they're going to make the decision, here's why that decision criteria makes sense, and start to be able to influence them that we're the best kind of solution given those 2 facts. So let me stop there. Does anybody have, like, kind of quick, anybody have any questions or comments about where we're at in the process? Okay, if you know, by the way. Yeah. All right. So the first thing that's different about MEDDIC is the depth at which we identify the value that the client's seeking when going after an MSP or looking for somebody to help on a cold managed basis, right? The second big difference in MEDDIC is it tells us to engage all the stakeholders that can help us identify or show evidence of that value, but also help influence them that we're the better choice than somebody else, right? So that's where the champion comes in. And it says that you should be looking for or at least a deal that has a champion on board is more qualified than a deal that doesn't have a champion on board. 2 is there's very specific things you're looking for a champion to do, which we'll touch on today. We won't go into great depth, but you're always looking for a champion. You're looking for the champion to give you certain things, certain advantages in a deal that they're not given to somebody else, right? So, like, somebody can't be a champion for 2 different MSPs in the same deal. It's, you really want to have somebody to have a kind of a rooting interest at minimum, but a betting interest or a vested interest in their company selecting us as their service provider. EB is the economic buyer. And then again, the other stakeholders are competition, both explicit competition, internal competition. So one form of competition, for example, is instead of hiring us, the internal IT team would prefer to do the work themselves, right? So that could be a form of competition. Or we're talking to somebody, or controller, and they're more concerned about what's going on with their ERP than anything to do with the managed service contract, right? So it's any force, either internal or external, that keeps them from signing the deal. And then process is kind of the decision process, the paper process. But what that says is, how do we keep the deal? How do we keep energy and momentum in the deal moving forward? And what are the steps required in order for us to finally get us a contract signed. So again, if you think about it this way, where it's a little more kind of sequential in the deal, it starts to make more sense. So what it's saying is, as we're doing the discovery meeting, we're looking for the value equation. As we're assessing, we want to make sure we're talking to all the stakeholders that matter in it. You know, as we get towards this case into the proposal process, what we're looking to do is build consensus with the stakeholders in order to get them to agree that we're the best choice. We're incorporating any changes in the process that they kind of bring up at the last minute, and Ryan's going to have a very good example of this. But basically, what it allows us to do is, if we get really good at that 6-step sales process, and we get awesome at qualifying those opportunities and pursuing those opportunities in a more disciplined or scientific method, or whatever word you want to use, using MEDDIC, that's what we're after in terms of, you know, making our MSP the best, the master of the sales process in our local market. So again, foundational, I'm going to go one level deep, and then we'll move over to what Ryan's going to cover. Right. So what's different? You know, I just read a whole bunch of slides with a whole bunch of definitions and a little diagram trying to get us excited about this. But when you really get into the nuts and bolts of it, this is what we want to be able to do differently among us when we're doing sales. Again, when I'm saying sales, it equally applies to CAMs, and I'll show you one in a second. But so what it really says is pain is our ability to implicate pain throughout this whole process is the make or break of the whole sales opportunity. Right. It's you got to know that you got to implicate same through the whole process. You got to see what they actually tell us to do is triangulate pain, so that we see the pain that we've identified early in the process. We want to see how other stakeholders in the company frame that same pain and how it implicates them. Right. So the more pain, the better. The more pain people across the board, the better. Our ability to drill down on the pain is going to make us look better and different than our competition. And the most important thing is you want to link pain to the decision criteria, and you want to know pain in a setup for the champion, right? And so Ryan's going to go through in a second some ways they did this kind of creatively in a sales process, and it's in that step that says assess, engage. It's the more that we understand pain and its implications up front, and the deeper that we understand that, and the more frames of reference we get in that pain, the more qualified, better that opportunity is. So metrics, we're not going to go in great detail right here, but we're going to start to, across the group, start to say, what kind of metrics can we start to demonstrate or quantify in the sales process that makes us build better business cases. There's no magic number. We'll go through the metrics that Ryan used today, and just they're very creative, and they resonated with the buyers, but they also gave tangibility to the value that we provide. And again, so I don't know why, I'm kind of an old guy, and I don't learn new things very often, but for some reason I had an epiphany when I went through the MEDDIC training, which basically says, if you think about what selling is, really what it gets down to is, how are people going to make it? Like, basically, what's important to people when making a buying decision, and how can we influence them that we are the best asset across each of those decision criteria, right? And oftentimes that you don't get to that till like you write the proposal, right, or you're trying to do the business case. What this says is you do it right up front, almost in the qualification meeting, right? And then you try to influence that decision criteria through every interaction you have with the client. And you try to get them to agree that's the criteria they're going to use to ultimately select a provider. And throughout the whole process, what you're really trying to do is show that you're the best choice against the criteria that everybody's agreeing on. And that's actually kind of a bigger, more explicit part of this. And one that I didn't appreciate till we actually went through the training and certification. So we're going to definitely adopt that. So again, I'm going to touch on this really briefly. So what's different? the cultivation and care and feeding and activation of a champion is very different. It's explicit and clear in MEDDIC. It's probably the one thing that it's most known for. And in many cases, like bigger companies, and actually it's in the MEDDIC training, they say if you don't have a champion, you don't have a deal. And so part of it is, you know, how do you over focus on your champion or create a champion in the process, or turn somebody who's a point of contact into a champion, right? The stronger you have a champion, the better odds you have at winning. And so it makes it kind of a central part of the process. Two, and Ryan could go through some example of this when he gets that too, but one of the biggest problems we have when we're selling particularly large complex is that we have a point of contact, or we have somebody that's who may be high up in the organization and may be a potential champion. And so we kind of see the opportunity simply through the eyes of the champion. And therefore we're selling into their pain, we're selling into their decision criteria, we're selling into, and the danger of that is the economic buyer, which is a person that ultimately makes the decision or basically signs a check, may have a completely different view of the pain, completely different view of what's important. They may or may not, and they tend to have certain ways that they make decisions that you can talk about. So getting access to and having a clear understanding of the economic buyer increases your odds of success, you know, dramatically. So the big thing they teach in MEDDIC and that we're going to adopt is start to talk to the economic buyer about how they make similar decisions in the past or in the present. Ask them what's similar or different about this decision process. Basically, you'll tend to find that economic buyers tend to make the same types of decisions the same ways. And so therefore, there's very specific questions you want to ask the economic buyer. There's very specific points where you want to make sure you get their point of view in the sales process. But again, if you can't have access to the economic buyer, by definition, it's a less qualified opportunity. And we should do everything we can to make the economic buyer pretty central to our sales process, right? Competition too, again, we talk about that. It's what you want to do, for example, is, again, a competition is not just direct competition. It's all the forces that can keep them from signing a deal, right? So what we want to do is figure out what are all those forces, and for your direct competition, what you want to do is you don't want to knock them, but you want to understand, first of all, do they have a champion? Do they have a economic buyer? How do they stack up on that decision criteria? How could we stack up better or differently than they stack up on those decision criteria? So there's very specific things within MEDDIC they want us to factor in our sales process, so that we make sure we're competitively, we're differentiated, and we're competitively superior in the specific decision criteria, you know, what we bring to the client to the net deal. So what's different again about MEDDIC? So the decision process, you'll find the people, and again, a lot of the people that use this are people that have an almost overabundance of opportunities. So it's very common, for example, in the SaaS industry or with big companies like Accenture, Cisco, there's that massive amounts of opportunities. So again, almost in the qualification meeting, and I think Ryan's going to go through this as well, is in the qualification meeting, what you really want to know is why now? Why is them selecting an MSP to help them at this point in time such an important priority now? Like why now? Why is such a compelling event? What's the deadline? What are the forces that make them need to make this buying decision more quickly, or more efficiently, or more expediently than normal, right? And it's all about people, process, timing, right? One thing we're going to talk about today, again, is how do you get, basically the question is, how do you get clients to engage with you in a way that helps you best sell to them? Let's put it that way. Or the other way I would put it is, how do you help them have a process that helps them make the best buying process? And what Ryan Eichler does and what Ryan Valdez is trying to do and other people are trying to do right now is what we call an upfront contract. That in the discovery process, what we want them to do, this comes out of a Sandler selling system, is you say, okay, if you want us to try to help you, what we found is the best way for us to identify, how we can help you, how to provide the most value is we need a sales process or a buying process that looks like this. It's got 6 steps to it. We need to make sure that we have access to these stakeholders. We need to make sure we have access to the economic buyer. And you can basically lay out your request or your demands, depending on how tough you want to be. But basically says, if we're going to engage together, here's what that process needs to look like, right? And we'll work on, the positioning of that and the messaging around that. But I think the basic idea is if it's a compelling event and they're serious about it, they need to have a serious commitment to engaging with you in a way that you can figure out how to help them, right? So we're going to experiment with different forms of upfront contracts and some examples of success people have at setting these upfront contracts. And the other thing about the decision process, again, particularly when you get towards the end of the process, is always having a way to keep momentum going, but next steps, milestone, deal calendar, go live timing, right? There's different techniques we could use here, but also help us be proactive and say, what if, right? Like if we're stalled out, what is it we can ask for, or what is it that we can offer that can get things off track or back on track, I should say, and heading towards the finish line in a way that we want it to be heading. But again, paper process, we won't go into that. And risk, we'll talk about that later. But basically what it's paper process is we're talking particularly in large company environments is you want to understand the paper process up front as much as possible so that you don't get surprised with, legal reviews or procurement reviews or redlining of things, right? You want them to be anticipated and planned for. And these are questions you can actually quote your champion, right? Is what are things we need to look out in the paper process? Where have you seen deals go wrong in the paper process? How can we be proactive? And introduce documents early. So, you can even have them start reviewing your agreements before they decided to hire you, right? If that's makes sense, right? So figure out all you need to do from a paper standpoint as early in the process as possible. And that's going to help you more efficiently and quickly get to the finish line, right? So the other thing we're going to do over time is we're going to come up with scorecards for all the stuff as we get in the training. But again, today is just to get you a flavor for what it is we're doing, why we think it's important. Again, why it can be almost like your over time, it could evolve into your EOS level, almost the EOS equivalent of selling. But there's enough here and there's enough training, and I've seen it work enough. It's actually working in some of the best sales organizations in IT in the world. And what we can do is, take the appropriate level of discipline for people like us and people of our size. But there's a lot here that can help us, particularly in larger deals and with more complex sales situations. So I just want to touch on this, and then Ryan's going to go through his example. Right. So there's a lot of CAMs on this process. So one obvious application of this is that if you're asking your client to make kind of bigger investments than is typical in your business reviews, or different it has to involve different people, or it's bigger and it's more wide ranging, that's really a sales situation. It's not a recommendation situation, right? So there's things get to a size and scale when it needs to be treated similarly to a big, you just take the word kind of new client out of it and just insert the word big opportunity with existing clients. And therefore that is a sales situation. It isn't, it isn't a run-of-the-mill recommendation. But the other application of it is it gives us, it actually gives us some food for thought about what's the real quality of the relationships we have with our existing clients, right? So one thing, you could look across your clients and say, we got, 20 A's and 20 B's and 20 C's, but even with each of those categories, you may have a widely different quality relationship with an A, right? So you could say, for example, one thing we can think about is, do we have a business advisor relationship with the economic buyer? And if not, if we do, that's great. If we don't, how do we build one over time, right? Is our point of contact a true champion for us, or are they just a point of contact, or are they just a ticket taker, kind of an admin person, right? So if we don't have a champion, what can we do over time in a relationship to build one up? The other one too, there's some examples I remember Brian Miller bringing up with this is, are there shareholders that are driving significant IT decisions that we just have no access or relationship with, right? So if it could be a controller, it could be, I don't know, operations director, right? Or VP of operations, right? Is there significant people in our client who influence IT decisions that they don't even know who we are or what we do, or we don't have any kind of relationship with them. We're just kind of a vendor. It's a transaction relationship. What competing IT priorities impact our budget, right? So what other things are they thinking and investing in that are kind of choking off funds or choking off energy or attention to the things we're proposing, right? And basically, what are the pain points? We should be implicating and understanding pain at our existing clients, far more so than what we're doing with potential clients. So what we're ultimately going to do is this will bifurcate a little bit, but it'll basically be, how do we use MEDDIC for selling big opportunities as well as kind of bigger or new clients of any sort, but particularly bigger clients, but also work with some people that are interested to see if is this something that we can build into kind of our business review process or our thought process to say, what is it we need to do from a MEDDIC standpoint to make this relationship even stronger or more bulletproof, right? So I know that was a little bit of structure and theory and definition and all. It may not kind of get your juices flowing yet, but I've seen the value of doing this stuff, and I think legitimately, if we can get to be really good at this, it is a distinctly strong and competitive differentiation, and it's one we'll have a plan going forward coming out of this that I'll talk to the owners about. But just wanted to get everybody kind of familiar with this and hopefully excited about it. And maybe this next thing I'll do. So Ryan, you want to come on and try to take us through your application and your big sale using that where MEDDIC was kind of central to the whole thing?
Yeah, thank you, Michael, and great to see everybody. Good to see some familiar faces out there. Thank you for the time. Can you all jump to the next slide?
Oh, sorry, that's me.
Oh, okay.
And let me put it in.
All right, good. Okay, I'll jump in.
Hang on. Sorry about that, dude. Yeah. There you go.
All right, so I'm going to walk you through a deal that took about 8 months to close, and I'm going to just go through. I'm going to get in the weeds a little bit, but I think it's important. I'm going to go through each of these milestones that got us through the finish line, and how we applied MEDDIC every step of the way. And the key really is just continuous qualification, and just keep qualifying. Even getting into the proposal, we're qualifying, making sure that I'm not wasting time, basically. So the client is Sports Medicine Associates of San Antonio. So they're a large, well-known orthopedic practice in San Antonio. They're the official physicians of the San Antonio Spurs, the San Antonio FC Soccer, another well-known soccer club in Bernie, and then they're also physicians for a local private university, St. Mary's. They do a lot of partnerships with local schools and high schools. They specialize in joint replacement, foot and ankle, neck and spine, and concussion management. So they see a lot of high school football players. They have 6 locations with a new office that's opening at the end of this month. They have about 180 employees with 140 true end users. So I'll jump into the timeline. So we're members of a local medical association called the Medical Group Management Association, or the San Antonio chapter, MGMA. Last year, the statewide chapter had their conference here in San Antonio. So that was last April. We participated. We had an exhibit at the conference. Before attending the conference, all the exhibitors, we got a list of the attendees. I researched, who are the participants before the conference. I put together a short list of prospects who I wanted to target, and Sports Medicine Associates was one of them. During day one of the conference, at our first break, I identified through their name tags, a gentleman who worked for Sports Medicine Associates. His name is Ricardo De Hoyos. He's their patient experience director. He was in attendance with 3 members of his staff. So the first time I spoke with him, I introduced myself. I asked him questions about their practice. What do they do? What makes them special? How long they've been in business? Who are their customers? And asked more about his role. We spoke for maybe 5 to 10 minutes. It was a quick break. We got down to where we went to high school, where we're from, about our family. I asked him to come by the exhibit later to talk more. So he did. Later in the day, him and his staff, they came by. I shared a bit about, who we are, our history, our service offerings, how we specialize in helping clients in healthcare and medical practices. And I asked his group, who manages their IT, and they said that they're outsourced. So I began, asking a little bit more probing questions, to see if they were a prospect. So I asked how is it going? How's your IT situation? The staff immediately made some anecdotal comments, like, yeah, they kind of suck. I was like, oh, so what does that mean? And they said that they take forever responding. A lot of the staff is troubleshooting their own issues. They gave an example where they call it in, they try to troubleshoot, then they call the help desk, and they could tell the help desk technician is Googling the same answers that they looked up when they were trying to troubleshoot. So they thought, hey, these guys are either new or they lost experienced technicians and they don't really trust them. So I asked what issues, I asked about their EHR system and how that was going. They said that they're with NextGen. They have issues with logging in, some ongoing issues with connectivity. They talked about some phone issues. So I got some good pain, from the staff. And then I got to speak again later to the patient experience director, Ricardo, and I asked a little bit more about his job, his role, and how IT was impacting, his role. He said he's responsible for overseeing and improving the overall patient experience, but he has a part-time IT hat that he wears. He said that and so I asked him, well, what do you do IT-wise? He talked about he orders equipment and sets it up for new employees. He's leading some projects, like a new location that they're opening in 2024, looking at a new EHR system, phone systems. And I asked how the current IT provider fits in with these projects. And he made a comment that, yeah, we really remove them from these projects, because we don't really trust them to take the lead on it. And so, so some legit pain by the staff and, by the patient experience director. And I asked him, I said, how's the, IT affecting really the overall practice? He said that it's a very fast-paced environment. They're growing tremendously, and in his perception, IT really slows them down. So we exchanged information. I told him, I had asked him who he reports to. He said, their CEO. And I asked if I can come by, meet with him and his CEO for maybe 45 minutes to an hour to learn a little bit more about their technology and see if there's any business case for change. And, he agreed and said he'd reach out with some dates. So I established, some pain and then identified champions, a champion in the patient experience director. So I reached out to Ricardo a few times after the conference, and of course didn't hear back. Followed up every few weeks, and finally towards the end of May, Ricardo reached out to me and he set up some time for me to come in and meet with his CEO in June. So unfortunately, I showed up at that meeting, and last minute the CEO wasn't able to make it. So I kind of rehashed some things, took the opportunity to just build some trust with Ricardo, took a look at their office. We had lunch, ended up kind of getting to know each other a little more. He felt bad. I could tell that the CEO didn't make it, and he committed to me that, hey, we'd schedule another meeting, which ended up taking place in August. So in August, I came in, met with the patient experience director and the CEO. His name's Dr. Adam Rogia. And I brought in lunch. It was very conversational. It was the three of us, confirmed and rehashed the pain points I'd already heard. He went through, the CEO went through some specific examples. He said that they had an unexpected system shutdown for 2 days a while back,
Wow.
that he was worried about employee productivity. He said that the IT company was brought on before by previous leadership. So he thought that in his perception, that the practice has significantly outgrown their capabilities. He said another thing was that their invoices had increased dramatically due to, there was a large increase that was fresh from backup, whatever their backup solution was at the time. He said that he'd like to bring in an orthopedic surgeon to meet with me. So he stepped out of the room, brought in one of the providers who's their orthopedic surgeon, and he just asked him, he said, hey, so, tell Ryan about your recent experience with Resident Tech, which is their, the incumbent. And he looked at me and he said, he said, they're effing idiots, basically, is what he said. And he talked about how he was trying to get on Teams on his cell phone. He couldn't do it. He was real frustrated. He was on the phone with their tech for an hour. After the call, his assistant, physician assistant, helped him fix the issue within a few minutes. And so that was another specific example. So I asked, towards the end of the meeting, I asked what their Dr. Rogia, the CEO, what his timeline would be to move to another IT provider. He explained that he answers to a board of directors and that they know he's exploring other options. He said that if he was comfortable with us, that we'd need to get on the agenda for their November or December board meeting to go through a proposal, that the board would have to approve it to move forward. He said that a transition for them would be easiest during the months of December through February, because the winter sports season is usually their slowest time. I asked him who was on the board. He said it's a group of 14 providers. We went over price. I told him, I said, hey, we're, $160 a seat. And is that an issue? And his response was, hey, we average 8,000 to 10,000 patients a month. 160 would be, within their budget. And so, so for next steps, I told him, I said, look, I'd like to bring in a few more members of our team and give you and anybody else you want to bring in the meeting an opportunity to ask questions, learn more about our expertise supporting medical practices. And he agreed to set up that date and time, and he did it on the spot, and we set that up for December. And he had asked, he said, hey, it's probably gonna be 4 to 5 people. Can you guys bring in some lunch? So now at this point, we have, more pain identified, by persona. We understand the champions, economic buyers, and really their decision process. I still need metrics and to better understand some of the decision criteria.
Mm-hmm. Well, you also got stakeholders, right? So
Yeah. Right, which I kind of bucketed with the champions, because like Dr. Rogia kind of bleeds in. He's a champion, but he's also an economic buyer, right? Yeah. So in September, Doug, myself, 2 of our CAMs, Mark and Hank, and then we are at the time new operations manager Trisha, who actually came over from a medical practice, came up to San Antonio. We met with Dr. Rogia, we met with Ricardo De Hoyos, the patient experience director, and then 2 of their providers who were also on the board. And one of the providers is the physician for the San Antonio Spurs, Dr. Young. So again, we started off recapping their IT pain challenges. The providers shared that they need smoother workflows, better ways of working. One of them said the phrase, we have death by 1,000 workarounds, related to issues with like their charting and their templates and their EHR system, and some issues with applications that aren't really integrated, correctly with their EHR system. And so what that did is that gave Doug and Mark and Hank an opportunity to share some stories on projects that we've done over the years for medical practices that solved some of the pain they spoke of. Doug also had shared a story with them about another orthopedic practice that's similar in size, who we supported for 8 years, but then left us during COVID for a more economical model because of how that impacted with them. And he said, yeah, they just came back to us. So that was good. And then overall, the meeting went well. And at the end, both providers offered us to come in and like spend a few hours with them, a half day or a day shadowing them, which I thought was a great sign, a good buying signal, and good opportunity. So we built trust with the key stakeholders, identified more champions and economic buyers because those two providers sit on the board. Some more pain with potential to build metrics. And I thought it was a good sign that the CEO had intentionally brought in two members that were on the board, and they seemed to be kind of their top earners as providers and doctors. So that was a good sign. So I'm going to share my screen here in a second, but so within the next couple of weeks, me and one of our CAMs, Mark, we shadowed Dr. Lopez at one of their locations, one of their smaller locations. And then Doug and I went in and we shadowed the Spurs doctor, Dr. Young, at their main location. We probably spent about 3 hours each at each location. And I documented all of our observations. I put together an observation summary. It's a 12-page document that outlined like common themes and risk that we identified at each location, with a conclusion that really aggravated all the top 10 common issues identified. We spent time observing and speaking to staff at patient intake, medical assistants. I even observed an end-to-end and did like a time study on a patient's experience and how the doctors input notes. When do they return calls? When do they return messages? I even got on the phone and was able to speak to their billing department to talk about pain from their billing department. So I'm going to share the document that I put together, and it was really well received by them. So here, 1 second.
Do you need me to stop? I don't know, use Teams very much. Do I stop? Or can you just start?
Yeah, you could stop. You could stop sending or stop sharing. Sorry. Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Make it a little. Can you make it bigger? There you go.
Okay. So this was a document I sent them. So here's the table of contents. So it's 12 pages, and it's observations from each of the offices with themes. I used Microsoft Publisher and some Chat GPT to help me kind of clean up the language and proofread. And so we start off with the Bernie office, and I'm not going to go into all the details of this for time's sake, but here's like some of the things that we saw, right? Login challenges, workflow efficiency, patient portal challenges. Everybody talked about issues that they're submitting, security concerns, because I mean, patient data is just like sitting out there in the hallway on workstations with not even, screen protectors. Anybody coming in to go to an exam room can see that. Issues with dial pad. This is really where, like, I dug in. It was like by department, and I started like, what's their software and applications? What's the workflow notes? What's the challenges? What's the workflow challenges? And I tied it to general IT support challenges. And so, long story short, at the very end of this, right, I summarized all the themes that we observed, and this really helped. This will help out CAMs draw out projects, but really it helped Dr. Rogia. It gave him like a good look at like, hey, these are some issues that are common within like, two of our, prime locations. So I'm going to stop sharing. I know we're kind of running up against time here.
We can go a little long if it's up to people. If they want. I wouldn't cut it short.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Can you can go ahead and reshare the presentation, Michael?
All right. You said something really quick there. Where the hell did it go?
And I did, just so you know, have a disclaimer at the end of that saying we're not under a formal partnership agreement. The information provided in this assessment is for informational purposes only, and put some like legal stuff that they can make decisions on their own, kind of thing. Just an FYI there.
Okay. I have no problem.
No, that's okay. Just I could finish talking through it. So after a week after the observation summary went out, so I sent it within 24 hours of Doug and I shadowing the Spurs doctor, and that was kind of our wrap up on shadowing. So I sent that out. A week later, I had a debrief session it was just me, Dr. Rogia, and the patient experience director, and I wanted to really keep qualifying. So I asked him for feedback on the observation summary. He said it was well received. I asked if I made mention that, you know, it seems like there's a lot of tickets being, you know, put in based on some of your folks. You know, do you have any insights on that data? The patient experience director said and this is tied to metrics, right? So in 2022, they averaged 500 tickets per month. And as of October 2023, they were trending at 550 per month. So I was very direct, and I asked him, okay, look, are you guys looking at any other MSPs? And Dr. Rozier actually said, and I could tell by the way he said it that he was maybe like lying about it, but he said, yes, we're looking at other MSPs. I said, okay, and could your current provider do anything that would make you guys stay? And he said no. And I asked if they thought we were the guys. I said, okay, you know, are we the guys? He said yes. So I asked him, you know, so what are the most important things to you? And we talked through a few things, and really the main things, like bottom line, is trust, right? The providers and the board, they have traumatic experience from the current IT provider. It starts with 3 months in. The IT provider told them, look, you guys are more complicated than we thought. And they like tripled their bill to the tune of adding $20,000 a month to their initial bill. So that set a terrible bar for the relationship. End users don't trust the help desk. They do not have technical alignment or VCIO services, but they were sold on an end-to-end service. And so that aligned our solutions. Their issues are outrageous, astronomical, right? Which indicates that the current MSP is having a problem with either staffing, with their process within the help desk, and the level of expertise their technicians are having. IT housekeeping, right? That was a huge thing, right? The leadership, like they're having trouble tracking their assets. The workstations and all the exam rooms were old and clunky, and there wasn't a plan. There's no life cycle management.
Interesting.
They were, and when we tried to get the end user count, like that was like a whole week of like, we had always thought they were 100 end users. We landed on 140, and we still question if that was right because they had trouble there. And then their top of mind thing was they're opening an office in January, and they wanted to make sure they have it. They're having it set up. Wanted to make sure everything was going smoothly, and they asked if we could have some folks on site at the grand opening to make sure that everything goes well. And then they have a list of projects that they do not trust the current IT company to run with, which is they want to move to a full cloud EHR system. They need some of their phone systems overhauled.
Oh, wow.
They want to open another office, and then everything that was in the observation summary. So those are the main thing: build trust, reduce issues, IT housekeeping, new office opening, right? And leadership's burdened with IT, functional roles, like they're doing stuff that the IT company should be doing. So,
Yeah.
So I established metrics, a big thing. We went into the proposal meeting with an ROI. So the example we used, the example we used was, look, if you have 100 employees, this data is telling us that if you spread out issues evenly across all the employees, that's about 5 tickets per employee per month. And if you think about putting in the ticket, responding the back and forth conservatively, we articulated that it's probably 30 minutes of time in total per ticket. So that's telling us you're leaking 250 labor hours per month, and that's increasing, and that's conservative. And that if you could take back 100 of those hours, which we explained that our medical practices that are similar in scope and size that are our clients, they're putting in 100 to like 80 to 100 tickets a month. So with us, if you got back 100 of those hours and could allocate that to see 4 more patients an hour, and they'd mentioned that their average, office visit bill is about $100. That's $40,000 to $64,000 a month based on that they could regain. We're paying for ourselves like 3 times over, and it's conservative. Then leadership's getting time back. Just a lot of other stuff. And so we left feeling the proposal meeting went very well. We left feeling confident that we had won the deal, and really and another thing real quick, during the proposal presentation, that orthopedic practice that I mentioned that came back to us, one of the doctors with Sports Medicine Associates knows a doctor from our current client, right, that came back to us and reached out to him, and he put in the chat a comment from that doctor that said Straight Edge is great to work for. You know, they've really helped us, and work with, and really, you know, how we really helped them. So that gave some confidence to the board.
Can I ask you one question, Ryan? So who did you propose to?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So we proposed to the board. It was 14
They
providers.
proposed to the board. Okay.
Yeah. So we got in on the board meeting December 6th. It was about a 45-minute to an hour presentation. It was Dr. Rogia, the CEO, and the 14 providers, and it was me, Doug, and Mark, our CAM that was present.
Oh, cool.
And so we left feeling great. It did take a week or a little bit over a week to finalize some things that I probably should have went over earlier, which some of our contract terms, nailing down the end user count was challenging and exposed even more pain, but we got that down, and yeah, they signed. We won that deal. I participated in a few things in the onboarding to help that relationship, and you know, I put next stop is program management. I'm helping our CAM make sure that we're continue to build a stakeholder relationship to help with like being very clear on and intentional in our communication strategy for projects like QBRs, newsletters. There's a lot of opportunity here for projects and ways to keep that client retention. One thing that we did is we have some Spurs tickets. We actually gave them some Spurs tickets as a welcome gift, and they raffled them off to the staff and said it was a welcome gift from from Straight Edge Technology, which hopefully built some good rapport with the staff. So
maybe Doug can answer, and Doug Miller's how was the onboarding of this client going to be different from the onboarding of like the client you got in Taylor's? And because you went through this process, does it create different kinds of expectations or different kinds of, or does it give you a head start in onboarding them?
No, I bet it'll be about the same as our average onboarding. Is what we're expecting. I mean, so far that's what it's been like.
Because it just seems like you get a lot of ammunition plus expectations.
But we have one just place where we stubbed our toe a little bit. We focus so much on the business pain. We actually didn't really dig so deep into their tech pain. And so like we found out that some of their servers were hosted with the incumbent MSP. But like we didn't know that until we started onboarding them, and no one in the room seems to know that either. But it's almost like we spent so much time on non-technical pain, we missed a technical thing. So that was just a little lesson learned for us. We were so focused on not solving their technical problems that we kind of missed something that we probably should have caught. But it ended up being a non-issue. Now we have a plan to fix it, but it was kind of like oh man, we never even asked that question, or they didn't even act like they knew that they didn't have all their own servers. So
yeah, and the way we overcame that, Michael, Doug, I'm sorry, I don't know if you're
good.
You're
Go ahead.
Is the rapport that we built with the CEO like made this easier than I had thought. So we had told them, we said, look, we're going to uncover a lot of things that the current MSP probably messed up on, things that we're going to uncover, we're going to need to talk to you about out the gate. So when we uncovered this, Mark and I went and met in person with them, and we explained the situation, and right then and there, he called the owner of the current MSP. We put him on speaker and got him to agree to host their data for a couple more months. Obviously they'll expense that over to Sports Medicine Associates while we work on our plan to migrate them over to a better platform. And it was easy. Like they were fine. They were completely fine with it. But to Doug's point, yeah, part of my ongoing question is who hosts your data? Where's your data hosted? But I don't think they really, they were nebulous about things that this MSP was doing. So
I was just like curious, Doug, like, so these guys, Dr. Rogia, is that how you pronounce that? And Lopez? Like, will you engage them in like QBRs and stuff like that? Or how, the fact that you went through this kind of exhaustive process, does it make you need to do things differently to keep them involved in the process?
I mean, I think it'd be in our best interest to keep them as engaged as we can. The Dr. Rogia will definitely be there. He's kind of the, on the totem pole in like the admin org, but getting one or two of their doctors to continue to participate would be huge. That's kind of something we wish we had everywhere.
Yeah, that's awesome. And was it just out of curiosity, Ryan, like when you asked it sounded like in your story that it was their idea to have you shadowing. Was it their idea or was it your idea?
It was their idea.
Interesting. Okay. Because what's cool out of that was that shadowing, and then the document you showed us and that was done before you proposed, obviously, right?
Yeah, it was.
Very
Definitely.
tangible evidence of the quality of what you guys do, right?
Right. And I think Doug's stories helped. Doug, them offering to shadow happened right after, Doug and I know Hank, they shared some stories on how they've helped other medical practices. And I think in their mind, they're like, oh, let's have these guys come shadow us and kind of get their take on some things. So.
I was trying to remember too, Ryan, when you sent me that text like over the Christmas holiday, what was the kind of surprise we had at the ending?
Their user, I mean, the pain in trying to get their end user account and land in a place that we needed to make sure that we were in a place where that did not put us at risk and we did not want to do the same thing that the other MSP did, was like all of a sudden, after onboarding, we're going to jack up their prices because we were way off on the.
And then my recollection was that he couldn't agree to the higher price without the board approval. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, exactly. So once we got to 140 end users, he took that to the board, and then he had sent me a text saying that they had got full board approval.
Okay.
Yeah, like the issue was that through the sales process, he kept saying we have around 100 people, and then they sent us a census that had over 200 names on it, and then they pared that list down. And anyway, we ended up landing at about 140 is where we think their actual real full-time head count is. But it was hard to tell if they were using that as a negotiation tactic or if it was just they really are that disorganized in their head count.
That's just really a cool story. First of all, congratulations. You got that may be one of the premier medical practices in San Antonio, I'm guessing. And then two, I guess the second question I had was if you didn't have MEDDIC, well, I guess how would I ask this question? Like where could we have gotten off track in here if we didn't use like the MEDDIC thinking? And to me, like the one thing I one thing I like about it is how deep into the process the proposal was actually done. Like you guys did a lot of work before you proposed.
Yeah, and I think a key was bringing up the team to get FaceTime with them, and then that's when we met two providers that are on the board, and so I think that's where they're like, okay, this isn't just Ryan in here, they know like, Ryan's in biz dev, and I built some trust with them. But I think us having really like a dominant marketing position or dominant position within like medical practices in South Texas, like that was established as they spoke to the broader team.
Yeah, when I look at this, and people we're over, so people can leave if they need to. But what's the thing I like about this as I look at this, Ryan, and kind of process it, like seeing it all in one slide, is one was the big thing is you got early access to the economic buyer, right? So you went from the client experience guy to your August meeting was when you met with the Dr. Rozier.
Correct.
Right. So that's a big difference. And then two is big difference is how you engage with them, how you engage with them after that in terms of assessment and, the workflow and all that stuff. That gave you the insights that are on the slide actually, right? So it's kind of by that engagement, you differentiated yourself both from their existing client and also gave them. I'd just be curious, do you think there ever was another alternative MSP besides yourself?
Unless they were just, I think that would only be to the extent of them like looking online or maybe making a couple calls. That's about it. I don't feel like they brought anybody else in there.
I was going to throw one thing there, MEDDIC related. So if we would have only talked to the patient experience guy,
you would have fucked it up.
We would have absolutely like fallen off early, or we would have wasted a stupid amount of time. Like we had to like move our way up, starting with the one guy. And I can see scenarios where that one guy could have been like, well, no, why don't you show me the proposal and then I'll take it. Like, you know, that would have got us nowhere.
100%.
And I've learned hard lessons.
That guy ultimately wasn't even in the proposal meeting at the end. So
yeah,
anyway.
I think that's right. I think that's right. Right. No, this is awesome. It gets me more excited, to be honest with you. I think it's interesting. You kind of really piqued my interest with the program management flag there at the end, actually.
It just has to be a really warm handoff from sort of the sales team into the account management team. It'll take a while. I think the bigger the client, the longer that relationship has to like transition.
Yeah. But the thing that I feel like, Doug, is the impression I got is you created such high expectations that if there was not a good handoff, it would be evident. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, it's like the depth of what you did should not. What they want to do is not make sure that you guys, you know, did all this work, got the job, and then like I'm curious, Ryan, how are you going to stay engaged? And then Doug, how does Ryan stay engaged, if at all, with the client?
I mean, I think you should continue to participate, right? Like, I mean, it's only a couple times, you know, a couple times a year where we'll be face to face with them. Like, there's no reason for him not to be there, you know?
Yeah, and I want to definitely create advocacy where we're getting referrals from them. I'm sure they're close with a lot of other medical practices.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's my goal, and I can do that beyond just participating in you know, some of the business reviews and things like that. Is I got to the point where me and the CEO can text each other, and we have, and so just probably going by to say hi and bring some Chick-fil-A and just catch up and things like that. Or I think will go a long way with them.
It's funny because what that tells me also, we'll cover this offline. I'm sure you're occupying people's time. Is all of the stuff you found out in the sales process is really good marketing stuff, right? I would love to see like you and the or Doug and the owner on a panel at the next event for this MGMA, talking about, you know, all the ways technology can affect your productivity or I don't know what the title is basically, but I could actually see you guys taking some of the insights from this and actually having some really good intellectual property, and maybe having, you know, joint presentations with the CEO or something like that. I think you can make a lot of hay from this.
Good idea.
Particularly if the guys who. He seems like a champion, honestly. Would you, I mean, looking back, I guess, Ryan, I'll let people go after this, but looking back, would you say it feels to me like the CEO is both the economic buyer and your champion?
Yes, absolutely. And he's the toll gate to get to anything the board needs to approve. So he has to approve it, then secondary approval is the board. So.
All right. So that was awesome, actually. So, does anybody have anything else they want to cover? If not, we can move on and do the rest of our day.
And anybody on the call, if you want to reach out to me, please feel free. And I saw some of the questions. I'll send out what I have on this to help you guys as well. So.
No, awesome. Off to a good start. So again, we're going to evolve kind of how we start to do some training around MEDDIC and some application around it, maybe some deal viewer structures. There's going to be a progression from this, but we just wanted to get this off the ground and get everybody up to speed. Anybody have any big heroic kind of? How would you wrap up, Ryan? I think what I hope is that this is just the first of like 3 of these for this year. Like what I really like to do is, you know, I'd like to see everybody have at least 2 to 4 like co-managed sales like that. And I'd like to see us evolve MEDDIC into our kind of business review fashion to talk about how we can make improvements in our client base. But
Yeah, for me, it was a mind set shift around MEDDIC, and it really did help. There are plenty of examples where I've wasted a tremendous amount of time not talking to the right person, or not aligning our solutions to the pain correctly, where I could have disqualified leads faster. And so
Yeah.
I definitely am a fan of MEDDIC, and I think the framework is helpful, and it really is just having a mindset, having those right questions to ask at the right time. So.
Awesome. All right. So I'll let everybody we'll get the recording. And so it looks like some people are asking for, apparently I might not send out the right slides. So I'll send out the slides that have Brian's slide in it. And we'll get the recording out to everybody, and stay tuned for where we take this. Awesome, everybody.
Have a good one.
See you guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.